వాళ్ళు my mother been making me chili, but now just a blanket and nothing. Yeah. Now under ban nothing. Or buy be nothing. Be a naked. You are. Genealogy and a managing. Kokalaji bunga majinalo. Parnabandi. Minga joro. Minijado. And Jambindi. Yadu ala jungala buli gululu ngayo gululu o darga ngabea dadi mami onu anding yara bula nyubarara to dagara bijida anyway la ngakano bunguranku kina ku barana wadi jula kada boda ngala bara yare ga jwadi jala jbara wana lallam.
In 1836, there were 2,000 Indians living in the timber alongside the Rock River. And one day there was a man along the shore of the river working on a boat. And he noticed that the Indians had come very near him, and he saw what they were doing. They had been hunting, and they killed a nice buck, which they cut in half. And they put half of the deer, the head side, in a large kettle, and they started cooking it without taking the skin off or without taking the hair off. And after they were done cooking it, they started to eat dinner with a chopstick. That's what it says. It also says that alongside the river, there was another group of Indians, young Indians, in a tent that weren't part of the feast. And he said that the Indians were in the tent incessantly wailing, and there was a young squaw outside of the tent incessantly wailing as well. And after a while, he surmised that this was a funeral ceremony for the squaw's young boy. A certain period of time passed, and the boat was finished, and it was time to flip it over. And the man who was working on the boat got another man by the name of Asa Crook, that's A-S-A, Asa Crook, to help him flip the boat over. Asa was familiar with the Indians. He had traded with them. And so he went and got the Indians, and he convinced them to help flip the boat over and push it into the river. But the only way that he could convince them was by promising them large amounts of whiskey. So after the boat was flipped over and launched into the river, Asa Crook went back on his promise. He decided not to give any of the Indians any whiskey because the Indians were naturally intemperate, which meant that they were probably going to get drunk and out of control, and he sensed that this would be dangerous. So he went back on his promise. He didn't give them the whiskey that he said he was going to. And the Indians were so enraged by this that they went across the river in their canoes, and they went to a cornfield, and they loaded up their canoes with corn and pumpkins, and then they left. So that was the story of Asa Crook, the whiskey, the boat, and the Indians. And it's a great story. And the amazing thing is that this Asa Crook guy, we actually have his picture. And so his picture looks like this right here. This is actually him. Now, if you look at that picture, you'll see that he had a short, full beard, he had parted hair, and he had a wave. That was his style. Amazingly, that style is still in existence, and you can't really see his picture because it's faded, but I found a modern day picture of someone that looked like him, and he actually looked like this right here. So the crazy thing is that we also have a picture of his wife, and his wife does not match up. Something's not right about this. His wife doesn't look like the type that I don't understand. His wife looks like she could be his grandmother, and they had 9 kids together. So I'm missing something. Something's not right about this. And I've seen that in the 1800s. A lot of times you see a husband and a wife, and it doesn't look like it was a match made in heaven. They don't look like they were supposed to get married. It doesn't make any sense to me. But in any case, his wife, in modern day terms, she kind of looked like this right here. So when you put those two together, we see like the classic 1800s distortion, to where you look at a situation or a story that happened a long time ago, and in modern day times it doesn't make sense anymore, and there's missing pieces that we just can't put together. But speaking of missing pieces, we do have something of his that is very important, and it fills in a lot of gaps in these types of stories. We actually have his house, the man's actual house. It is Asa Crook's house, which was built in 1840s. So I have arranged for someone from the historic district, the historic society, to open up the house and give us a tour. It's his house, it's been preserved, and it's on display. So I'll see you at the Asa Crook house. Okay, so here we are inside the house, and it's better than what I thought it would be. And the very first thing I noticed is that I have seen all of this stuff before, but I haven't seen it in real life. I've seen it like burned down, buried in the ground, and rusted. I've never seen artifacts, you know, in their original conditions. If you look at this chimney right here, this is the original chimney from like 1830 something. Okay, so over here we're looking at one of the big beams in the house, and if you look, you can see all types of like irregular markings right here. And so the historical society tells me that this is made from an adze. Like Asa Crook himself probably hit this with an adze, trying to square it up and make an actual beam out of it. So at one time this was a tree probably growing alongside the river, and now it's a house. Okay, and here I've always wondered about this. Here it is. This is the original square nail that we always find. You know, we find millions of these. I've never seen one that wasn't rusted. Okay, have a look at the bed. If you peel back the blankets here, you'll see this old-fashioned idea. You had these knobs right here, and then you would have some type of cloth rope. And that was better than sleeping on the floor. So I mean, at the time, this right here was pretty luxurious and probably pretty comfortable. It's probably like sleeping on a hammock. Here's another thing that always bothered me. It's late at night. It's cold out, the house is cold, the yard is frozen, it's covered with snow. How do you go out? How do you use the rest? How do you use the outhouse? Well, here it is right here. It looks like an ordinary dresser, right? And you have these drawers that open up, but in the bottom there's a secret. So growing up in the South, I never heard the expression sitting on the pot. That's a Midwestern thing. People talk about sitting on the pot. I never knew what that meant. But if you look in the bottom of this, guess what there is? Yeah. A pot, huh? Imagine that. Okay, so I guess, well, adults too, and kids. This was the facilities at the time, and so that's what you would do instead of going out into the cold. You would this was the bathroom at the time. I always wondered about that. So when you were done using the restroom here, you had to wash your hands, and you know, how about running water? What would you do for running water? Well, this is it right here. This is your running water. You would literally pour the water into this bowl, wash your hands, and that was your running water. Now, I imagine that once you were done with this sink apparatus right here, you would probably open up the window and dump the entire thing out the window. I imagine that's exactly what they did, as well as that down there. Where did they put that? Okay, so I've just been informed that this right here was probably all hand split from one board. Maybe it was made out of cottonwood, which would split when it was wet. So still a ton of work to do this. You had to split all the wood, and you had to tack it to this beam right here, and then you had the job of mixing up the plaster and spreading it in there. But that's what you had to do because we didn't have drywall, and of course it would be really hard to paint over this. And so I think that's why most of the houses of that time period had wallpaper. How about this old lock right here? Have you ever found one of those and wondered how old it was? Amazing. Okay, so apparently Asa was a justice of the peace as well as a postmaster. And you can imagine what that job entailed back in the days when the population was so low. This is on loan here, so this wasn't actually here, but it typically would have been found in this type of operation. You have something that served as a filing cabinet, right? And so all the legal papers and maybe the mail and postcards that came in would get stored in here. So you can imagine how exciting it was back then to get like a letter in the mail from someone. That would have made your day, because that letter was handwritten and it was delivered, on foot, by train. I mean, Alright, so you want to talk about hard work. Look how much work was entailed in actually building a wall. The very first thing you had to do is literally cut down a tree. You had to go in the woods and find a nice straight tree and think, do I want that in my house? Am I going to make a wall out of that? And you can see that they didn't need to cut the bark off because no one was going to see that. It was going to be covered up with all of this plaster. So cutting the bark off was just a waste of time. The only thing you needed was this flat part here so that you could nail the lath in. Okay, so we're in the basement now, and the basement has been modernized, but the amazing thing is that right now above my head I'm looking at a giant beam that was literally hand cut by Asa himself. So let's take a close-up and let's look at some of the tool marks. Okay, so here's some of these tool marks. So I mean, at one time this was a tree, and you had to square it up, and it took all day long to do that. And if you look over here, you'll see some of these big gouge marks right here. That was made by the subject of our story. I like that. Here's some modern day Romex alongside some like 1800s timber with some HVAC. How about that? Some of these things, like if you look at all this Romex right here, you can see that it's been tacked into like an actual log that literally has bark on it. I mean, can you imagine that? I mean, I've worked in some old houses, but this is amazing. I love these old books right here. Can you imagine sitting down and just reading this entire book? Look at the size of the font. Oh, it's a Bible. Yes. It's a Bible with pictures. Size what? Size 8? Fonts? No, it's not a Bible. No, it is. It is a Bible. Yeah, Psalms 8. I have never seen a Bible this old. It's like an 1800s Bible, and I think you would put a picture of your family there. Oh, I get it. It's like a family Bible. And you wrote the marriages there. Oh, I see. Okay. That's amazing. I've always heard about this. It's the family Bible that sat on the table. And you would write down the marriages, and you would put pictures of people in there. Imagine that. Jeez.